So did you folks have a good week and weekend? We have Memorial Weekend. I was kind of excited. I found out just recently that my youngest is going into the military. And the reason that makes me excited is most deployments, people go to play, you have no control over where you go. But I think there is something about the character of a young person who volunteers to stand between danger and my family and me. And I think that's how I view it. And I think that is wonderful. In my family, we've had several people join the military, and it's just I love the fact that a teenager can feel uh, like they're part of something so much bigger than themselves. I don't know. I think it says a lot for the teenager and for the parents that raise them, ultimately. Anyway, um, this week we're going to be talking about a few things. I want to specifically go over the quiz. Not the whole thing. I used to go over the whole quiz question by question, but all of you guys have access to the text by now. You can go to either to the Fulton Library or access it online, or you've got yourself a physical copy. What I do like to do, though, is after at least half of the people have taken the quiz, talk about it a little bit. And that's when, if there's any confusing questions that come up or things that you had concerns about, we can focus on those. And you probably have noticed, have all, Natalie, Kelly, and Samantha, have all of you taken the quiz, the second quiz?
Yeah, I did.
You did?
Yeah.
Yes.
Kelly and Nicole, you did too?
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed, remember I said at the very beginning of the class, each quiz has a couple ringers where you can find a correct answer on Google, but the only correct answer for the quiz you have to find in the text. Have you guys already seen that a couple times?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's usually when I know that those are the questions that let me know that either the person hasn't tried to get the textbook or it hasn't gotten here yet. And, since you can retake the quiz, not a big deal. But so when we get to that, we'll talk about it, but we'll just highlight the questions that you guys feel or would be important to go over. And then I also want to talk about the artist research and service learning. We've had a couple of people that said that they want to do the service learning, and that's always exciting. We usually have about a quarter of the people in the class will do the service learning. And the projects are always unique and very interesting. So we'll talk about that. And then you'll notice that in your layout of modules, there's one that isn't due until the end of the term, but it's open now, so you can look at it. And it's listed before most of the rest of the class. And that is the application of the tools of artistic critique, doing a self-critique and a peer critique. And that's something that I want to make sure we talk about before leaving as well. And then we'll talk more about the wire and see how people are doing. And if that's good with everybody, then that's how we're going to go. If that's not good with everybody, that's how we're going to go anyway. Okay, I am opening up the quiz right now. Have you guys had any significant challenges so far in the class, or have you guys had any issues about resubmitting stuff?
I haven't had any issues.
Okay. Have any of you resubmitted something that I regraded right away?
I
I
did.
thought, Samantha, didn't you need to put in a couple more comments or something?
Yep, I did.
Okay, all right. And as soon as I saw your email, I took care of it. But I think that as flexible as I try to make this class, one of the ongoing things that can be frustrating about an online art class is you don't really have much interaction with the people around you, and that can be frustrating. And so if anybody does have questions that they need to ask or have anything be clarified, don't hesitate to get a hold of me. Several of you already have. I think about a quarter of the class has already reached out to me about different things. And even if it's like last semester, one person didn't understand an assignment. And so she did a little bit of it, sent me photos and said, am I going the right direction? And we did that back and forth a couple times until she got more confident. And I'm totally happy to do that, again, because this is an online class and we don't see each other regularly. I'm just going to go through these. I have a couple questions picked out. If I skip over one that you want me to touch on, please let me know. This first one, which type of line is the most calm and peaceful of those three?
Horizontal.
Oh, hey, Emily. What's that?
Hello.
Horizontal. Do you know, why is the horizontal line the most calm and peaceful?
Because it's the most steady. It's flat. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, it can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. If it's vertical, it might be momentarily stable, but it still feels like it's going to collapse. And then diagonal, why is the diagonal the least calm and peaceful?
I think because it is off balance and it's kind of just like in our experience as humans who have always, since children have to learn how to balance and not fall over. Diagonal lines are just unsettling and or give an energy of movement.
Yeah, excellent. That is perfect, because the diagonal is in the process of falling. It's in the process of moving. And I think you're exactly right. So if we see one that's stationary, I think almost everybody feels slightly unnerved by it. And so it puts us on edge. And I really appreciate everybody who answered this. Almost everybody answered it with the same answer. But what I enjoy about this class is that everybody has their own unique sets of reasons, their own unique ways of explaining themselves. And I really appreciate hearing that from everybody, or reading that, everybody. And of course, this is one of the ringer questions. Now, in your experience, somebody other than Samantha and Emily, in your experience, do you believe that humans do have a tendency to create order out of chaos?
I do. I think that's just naturally how we try to process information. We try to group things together or relate them to things that we do understand so that we can more easily make sense of the things that we don't.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And everybody who answered that question answered it along those lines. And I believe that is completely true. Have you guys heard the phrase uncanny valley?
Yes.
Yes. Uncanny valley refers to something that we look at that is very, very close to being realistic, but there is just enough of a separation between us and realism that it makes us feel unsettled. And oh, Matrix was like that, where it reads as 99% completely realistic. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the Matrix movies, but it was 99% completely real. And then you have just a little bit of stuff that feels unsettling, where people move in ways that they're not supposed to be able to move, or their clothing moves in ways that it's not supposed to be able to move, and it's just a little bit unsettling. And one of the reasons why it's called uncanny valley is because we feel that certain amount of being disconcerted when our brain can't entirely process the whole of the experience. Our brain isn't quite able to categorize it specifically to something that we are familiar with. And so I think that's really interesting. But yeah, definitely. And it relates directly to this because in order for our brains to process, it tries very hard to put it into concrete, ordered, essentially file folders. And so I think that's really an interesting part that, or interesting thing our brain does. Now, this question, most everybody was able to find it. I think it is in about the middle of the second chapter you're supposed to read on this. There is a heading of a subsection that is called Unifying Principles of Design, and all 7 are listed there. And I think one of the paragraphs that describes them has 2 of the unifying principles together. Now, here's something that I did want to talk about because I think it's going to be really helpful as everybody does their stuff moving forward. What are some of the ways that an implied line is created? And there's at least half a dozen.
By creating perceived lines between the eye line of a figure and another object or another person in the work.
Yes, yeah, very good. There is a sculpture here in St. George that just frustrates me completely. It's really irritating. It's 4 children playing together. And my wife could not understand why it frustrated me so thoroughly. But it is because even though it looks like the children are looking at each other, like there's one swinging another one around, and then the other pair are playing catch with the ball, their eyes are not looking at each other. They're looking in completely different directions, and it just bothers the snot out of me. And fortunately, as soon as I pointed that out to my wife, she felt the same way. Now she hates it too. So too bad. But yeah, excellent. And that is one of the main ones that the text talks about. What are some other ways implied lines are created? I'll say one. I'll point one out right here on my shirt. There's a couple implied lines. My shirt does not have these lines drawn on them, but where the planes of shadow and the planes of light intersect, that isn't, even though that's not a drawn line, it becomes a line visually, and it's one of the definitions of implied line. Yes, Emily, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, sorry, my connection cut out for a sec, but I was going to answer another way that implied lines are made. When things that are not necessarily the same object in a piece look like they are continuing on from each other because they're tangentially like next to each other. For example, in sculptures, when the arms or legs like are
Right.
lined up with each other and they kind of lead you through something in a line.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Where again, the person has not drawn a line, but it registers in our minds anyway. Hey, one thing I'm noticing is that Samantha's microphone seems to be working just fine, but my computer is really screwing up with Emily's and Nicole's microphones. Do you guys hear any of that reverb, or are you guys totally fine?
I can hear you okay.
I
It might just
don't.
be because I have headphones on.
I can hear.
Okay.
Yeah,
Kelly,
I
how
hear
about you?
everything fine.
Okay, good. And Emily, you hear everything fine?
Yeah, I do. Sorry about my connection. I'm kind of on the move, so it might be because I'm changing networks.
Oh no, that's no problem at all. It just I'm every time there's a problem that comes up, I get that solved, and then something else pops up to make it our time together interesting. So as long as you guys can hear, that is just fine. So yeah, that's at least 3 different ways that implied lines are created. And that is something that's really important to be aware of as we build stuff. There's one of the artists that you looked at for this module is named Anthony Gormley. And a lot of his stuff is making human figures feel like they're present when most of the work to get it to look like a human figure is done by our brain seeing his implied lines. And I think that's really fascinating. If you look at some of his more recent stuff, it's very, very obvious that he's doing that. And I think this question of the intent of a work of art, everybody has hit that right on the head. Everybody knows what they're talking about, which is really exciting to see. Have you guys seen like Dr. Seuss? Do you know who Dr. Seuss is?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Yeah, Dr. Seuss was a child's author who did a lot of illustrations for his books, where the illustrations are cuddly and cute and incredibly approachable. They make children feel safe. It's one of the reasons why his books have been so wildly, fantastically received, wildly well received. And a big part of that is because he knew exactly how to evoke feelings of safety and humor in the line quality. So, and I just think that is one good example. And we can all find really good examples too. And I think that is really fascinating to me, how much of the communication we receive visually is based on our perceptions around line quality. I think that's really interesting. From advertising, the way that fonts are used and what kind of fonts are used in advertising, to artwork that we see, and even clothing. That's pretty astounding. All right. And again, if anybody misses any points on the quizzes, please take a moment, go back and see what the points are that you missed and what I have to say about it, and then resubmit the quiz after you make the correction. Okay, I'm going to go through a couple things really quick here. And if you guys have any questions, please say something and let me know. Okay, this is Module 7A, Artist Research or Service Learning. There's only a couple people that haven't turned this in yet. Almost everybody has. And all this is you tell me if you're going to be doing the artist research project or if you're going to be doing the service learning project. Either one. And if both of them show up, they shouldn't be showing up. I'm sorry. Whichever one you choose, you will not be responsible for the other one at all. And if both of them are showing up right now, that means you haven't made that determination. Just double check, but you will need to pick one or the other. And as soon as you pick one or the other one will disappear from off your things to do list. So I think there's about 3 or 4 assignments for artist research and 3 or 4 assignments for service learning. And so most everybody has done this. And the artist research option, this you go through and pick an artist from that list of 75 that I included, and that's the artist that you're going to be doing all your artist research project on. And I feel that's important to point out because I have done this in previous semesters where a person has just picked a random artist for each of the different things. And the different things are, there is a annotated bibliography, there's a PowerPoint presentation, and then there's an opinion survey, an opinion essay that you do. So there's 3 things that you do. And all 3 needs to be on the same artist. So that's why you pick this artist. And this is the artist that is specific to the artist research projects, not all the other things that you do during the course, just for the artist research projects. Is that Is that pretty clear to everybody? If it is, could you show me by giving me a thumbs up?
Yeah.
Excellent. Great. Excellent. Now, if you are going to be going the route of the service learning option, what you're going to be doing is basically designing a, uh, a service project for somebody who needs it in the community. You're going to be designing it by working with them, and you're going to be doing this only for the amount of time that you would otherwise spend on the artist research stuff. It's really important to keep it limited to that amount of time, because I have seen that community organizations, people in the community who need help, they are so excited to have you helping them that they, without any intention to malice at all, they're always really nice people. They just keep asking if there's more that you can do. And so you get pretty significant scope creep potentially. And I don't want you to do that. Stand up for yourself, stand up for your rights, and outline what you are going to do at the beginning when you start talking to folks, and then stick with it. And there are several different organizations on campus that you can work with, as well as neighborhood organizations. And this one, if you're one of the people in the class that have chosen the service learning, talk to me directly and I will help you go through the process. You know, we can have a couple Teams meetings, do stuff like that, but I will help you through the process so that you are empowered to stand up for yourself, so you don't get you don't become a victim of scope creep. And again, it's not because people are being mean or anything. It's because people are so freakishly excited that you are helping them that they don't know when to quit. And so that, but it can be, this by far has been the most rewarding experience that people in the class have had over and over again. And then of course you have a work log. And once again, the work logs are specific to the modules in which they're nested. So you only write down, like, for example, if you are working on your research module 7.A, at the same time you are photographing your house or doing your wire project, only count the hours for the research module in this particular work log, and don't count the research module hours in the work log that you're doing for the house or the wire project. Does that make sense? Could you show me a thumbs up on that if it makes sense to you? All right, excellent. Good, good. Now, I'm going to try to do this. I hope it works this time. I've had problems showing this video before, which is really disappointing. So we're going to try to show this video. And right before we get into it, I want to share with people just a reminder of what this is that we're talking about. Okay, now I talk about it as a burden of glorious purpose. You guys know which movie that's from. But this is an introduction to the tools of artistic critique, and then I'm going to talk about the tools of artistic critique. We spoke a little bit last week about how precision in language seems to help us funnel our thoughts more precisely. And that kind of process where we're using vocabulary with intention, we're using our thought process with intention, that kind of process is called critical thinking. And what I really like is UVU has tried very hard, particularly over the last 3 years, to make sure that people understand that critique is not supposed to be negative. Critique is an opportunity to share with somebody your observations using intentional or critical thinking. Critical, the synonym for critical is intentional. It means the exact same thing. So when we talk about critique, when I was young, starting in art programs that I was in, critique meant a stranger was going to tell you how badly you screwed up and how you can fix it. And that always irritated the crap out of me, because how on earth do they know what I was trying to do? How could they know? All they can tell me is, if they are a welder, how to weld my joints better. You know, if they are really good at sgraffito, how to do better sgraffito in my own paintings. That's all they can tell me. And that kind of resistance to critique, I think, was justified, because I was being told by strangers how to fix stuff that they didn't know what the intent was. And so this model of critique has been something that more and more people on campus have been adopting in every class. And I really appreciate it, because it stresses the fact that we are looking at things with intention. We are not looking at things to tear anything down. And so I'm going to go over, since I'm sharing screens, I can't really see everybody's faces. So go ahead. If you want to make a comment, unmute yourself and say something. But I'm just going to go over this really quick, and then we're going to look at this video that I have lined up so that we can hear how people are applying the tools of artistic critique. And there's something I want to point out as we go through each of these, that I will as soon as after we talk about them. The first one, description. I really like this. We are looking only at the visual facts, just the visual facts. Artist, title, date, and medium. Yes, absolutely. Who made it? When did they do it? What's it made out of? All those things that are obvious. We're also talking about size. We're talking about colors. We're talking about visual textures. We're talking about, can we see lines and different shapes? You know, does it look weathered? Does it look complete, clean and pristine? Does it look like it was very carefully constructed or slapped together in a hurry? All those things, I think, we can identify, or at least describe, begin to see when we are just describing the physical parameters of the object that we're examining. And when you do this, this list of questions, about a half a dozen questions, are really good to have in the back of your mind, so you can talk about it confidently. You don't ask the questions out loud, but you answer them out loud. Like, you know, looking at something, is it realistic? Then you say out loud, this appears not to be very realistic, but it does seem to be slightly abstracted. You know, so we can use words like that. And what's interesting to me, the more precise you are in your description, the easier the rest of the critical analysis falls together. And so, but the second one, so the first one is all what's in front of you. The second one is analysis. How did the artist make it? And first, this does not need an awful lot of imagination. We are just using what we observe, and we are just putting words to what we observe, and that's it. But analysis, we're stepping back just a little bit and trying to figure out, how would I do this if I was putting it together? What kinds of techniques would the artist use? How did they make potentially the choices that they got? What kind of usage of tools did they have to be familiar with in order to get the textures that they had? Did they use chisels? Did they use knives? Did they use hasps? Did they use scissors? Did they use a hammer? All those are really good questions. And the difference between these two things is, we are starting to extrapolate. We are starting to use our imagination to figure out how the object was made. So we're making it just a little bit more personal. Now, this third one, interpretation, this is where we start using even more of our imagination. Perhaps this is even when we start finding out a little bit about who the artist is. because we're trying to look at what we see. We're trying to imagine how the artist put it together, and now we're imagining what is the rationale the artist was using as they put this together. What do we think they were intending? Is it something that is very hard to get into, where we really don't understand what they were trying to do? Or is it something that is open to us, that we can feel like we understand what's going on? Does the artist feel like or do we feel as if the artist is trying to give us a riddle, or are they trying to say something? Or are they just opening up their brain a little bit so we can peer inside without having to use words? This is where we're thinking, what is the artist trying to communicate? Why was the piece made? Perhaps does the piece give us a window into the artist's worldview? Does it ask us to look at our own worldview? So the difference between analysis and interpretation is we are trying to extrapolate where some of the meaning resides by applying even more of our imagination. And then at the very end, I think I'm going to get rid of judgment. I do like evaluation. I think evaluation sounds more appropriate. And this is where we need to be careful with our words. And the reason I say that is not because of hurting anybody's feelings. Most of you in this class have gotten to the point where if you're an artist, you don't like hurting people's feelings anyway. You'd rather have them think about the feelings themselves and then feel guilty if they want to. But evaluation is where we decide, did the piece fill the parameters? Did the piece follow through with what we think the artist was trying to do? Was the piece successful in fulfilling the assignment or in creating an environment of communication? Now, this is almost entirely our own judgment. But I think in this case, it can be completely valid because we have been using precise thinking and precise language to develop each of these other tools. And by the time we get to here, whether or not anybody agrees with our evaluation, we can enunciate precisely why it is we feel the way we feel about whether or not that object or that thing is successful. Does that make sense to everybody, that kind of process that we're doing? All right, excellent. So at the beginning, it is all about, thank you guys, it's all about our physical encounter with the object. And by the end, it's all about our own internal thoughts regarding the object. But there's an interesting series of steps between those two extremes. And I think by the time we get to where we can evaluate it, we have already, we have developed the language necessary to completely explain ourselves. What's interesting is that when we get to that point where we use these tools to get to the point where we can evaluate something, then we can talk about it intelligently with somebody else who doesn't agree with us, and nobody's feelings gets hurt because we're exchanging our ideas using buffers of language. Nobody is directly attacking anybody. And I think that that is one of the delightful things about this entire process. Okay, now I'm going to share the video. Please tell me right away if the sound is wonky on this. Let me know. And for everybody who is watching the recording of this, please be mindful that if it is not showing up in the YouTube thing and I had to cut it out, you're going to need to watch this video as well. So here we go.
Describing something can seem a word, but in
I'm
fact,
sorry. Could any of you guys hear that at all?
I could hear it.
Okay, was the sound clear?
It was for me.
Okay, if it was clear, then I'm going to go ahead and play it because from my end, it sounds really wonky, and I don't understand why. So, all right, so we're going to go ahead and watch this. And as we watch it, they're going to be looking, there's two people that are looking at a sculpture. And then I want you to pay particular attention to how their views about the sculpture changed from the beginning of when they first examined it to the end.
describing a work of art can take time and should take time, because the more you describe something, the more you understand what you see and the closer you'll get to interpreting what you see. So this is why describing is one of those first skills that art historians learn.
And really, anybody who goes to the museum should have conversations about what they see and the associations that it brings to mind, in addition to pure description.
So here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to talk about when the sculpture was made. We're not going to talk about the historical context. We're not going to talk about the artist's biography. We're only going to describe what we see.
I see a human body, and it's large, one that's abstracted, that's not a careful rendering of human anatomy.
I see what look like arms and legs and a reclining figure.
There's no question that we immediately recognize the legs, the knees, the torso, the elbows, the neck. But the more that we look at those individual parts of the body, the more that we see the choices that the artist has made, the more we recognize that this is not an actual elbow. That's not really a neck. That's not really a head, but we still see it that way.
And most obviously, what makes this not really a body is the giant cavity, that giant open space where we expect to see a torso.
But before we begin to describe the individual elements of the sculpture, I think it's also important to make a few observations about the material and the surface. The sculpture is a dirty white, and it's so smooth that it invites us to touch it, even though the museum would rather we didn't.
Well, it does have these lovely curvilinear forms that feel like they would be very pleasurable to touch. But there's also a way in which that dirty ivory.
Okay, I'm going to say right here, I concur with them. Do not invite yourself to touch anything in a museum unless you are specifically told to by one of the curators. And even then I would hesitate. So just a word of warning.
Color feels like bone, feels organic.
And that's complicated because bones are on the inside, but what we're seeing is the outside. Or is this a fossil? Has the flesh been removed? Except that the figure seems animated. It seems as if it's still intact.
As we look closer, we see forms that seem to be missing. Hands, or at least fingers, feet, and parts of the body also seem to be duplicated. What read to me as breasts occur in two places in the sculpture. What read to me as hips occurs in two places in the sculpture.
So we can't be too literal at any point. You said a moment ago that there are no fingers, but there's a reference to fingers. That is, the fingers have been abstracted. If you look at the figure's left hand, it seems to be a fist with its fingers curled in, described by an oval of string that's embedded in the surface.
Nevertheless, the artist has decided not to give us individual fingers. He's decided not to give us an ankle and a foot with toes and an arch in it.
But that is still a foot. Because of the angle at which the leg ends, I get the sense of a heel, of toes, and I get the sense of where the ankle would be. It's as if the artist is inviting me to fill in what he's left out.
In a way, the negative space, the space between the forms, feels just as substantial as the forms themselves. That space where the torso should be, which is empty, the way that what reads as the spine or the upper back is uplifted as the form seems to support itself on its elbows. That lovely negative space that gives us a sense of lifting up, of the upper body.
And because of that lifting up, not only on the elbows and the forearms, but also on these other indeterminate limbs, I get the sense that this is not only human. It's a different kind of creature, almost an insect that could move forward on all fours or perhaps all sixes.
There's also a tension between the soft, organic, rounded forms and these straight lines that seem to draw our attention to a breast, an elbow, a shoulder.
A contour. This is drawing on form. Granted, when I look at this sculpture, I can't help but think of the human body, but I also have a sense that I'm looking at a landscape, that the knees are distant mountains, that somehow this is a unity of human form and the earth itself.
It's so funny that you say that, because when I see this sculpture, I immediately imagine a figure on a beach. So I didn't just imagine a reclining figure. I imagined the natural location of this figure outside,
Sunbaked.
in fact, lifting up to catch the rays of the sun.
The almost cushion-like form in the center of the sculpture that can be read simultaneously as a chest, as breast, perhaps as a torso, as an indeterminate form, creates for me a feeling. It is the feeling that I have when I arch my back. When I look at this sculpture, I feel that pulling in my body. And so the artist has used the simplest of tools. He's used form itself. He's used the line that he's constructed with string. And he's able to create in me an association and a physical memory.
Some views of the sculpture feel very recumbent and languorous, where others have a sense of tension. If we look at what reads as the head, we see two circular forms with an indentation in the center that read as an eye, and that open mouth that seems to be yearning and even almost crying.
So we've spent only a few minutes looking at this sculpture, but we've developed a whole set of associations. We've matched words with what we're seeing, and those words have created a foundation for our own personal interpretation. And I find that if I spend time describing, if I spend time looking closely, even a work of art that at first seemed difficult and confusing, that perhaps I didn't like at first glance, this changes, and an appreciation for what the artist achieved begins to develop.
What did you guys think about that video?
I think it's interesting just how much they could describe about it. I mean, you can look at that and just think like, oh, it's a white sculpture, but they were able to put so much description into it and really evoke a lot of different scenarios and emotions from just describing what they were seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. Have you guys heard about the name Clement Greenberg? Is anybody familiar with that name? Okay, Emily, you said something. I'm sorry, it only showed up for just a sec.
She had put in the chat that she had the same thought, that they just had so much to say about it.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it's interesting to me how that develops. So I'm glad you saw that too, Emily. Clement Greenberg was a person who I believe is the one who way back in the 50s said if you don't get it right away, it's just not worth the effort. And that was an opinion that was shared by a lot of people. Oh, no, don't worry about it, Emily. That opinion was shared by an awful lot of art critics at the time. This is a period where a lot of people are experimenting with what modern art means, where they're just creating stuff to be experienced, where content was not necessarily the most important element of the art. Sometimes it was. A lot of the times the art was intended to be a visceral experience. And I have a real problem with the assumption that an art or a value placed on art can be determined by just a moment of interaction. And maybe that can be true of some things, but one thing, like what Nicole and Emily pointed out, almost always when you spend more time with something, when you examine it through a process of structured thinking with intention, and again, intention is a synonym for critical. When you examine it intentionally, you are going to begin to notice more and more elements, and you're going to begin to be rewarded for noticing more and more elements about the art, how things relate, how things fit with each other, how things talk, how parts talk to each other, how things are balanced, how the textures work together. And as you see more and more of this, at the very least, I would hope that it would help expand your appreciation of whatever the thing is, or at least your respect for it. And then later on can come enjoyment of the art. And so I think that observation that is attributed to Clement Greenberg is really not entirely appropriate. This idea that if you don't get it immediately, it's not worth getting. I think I would I would think that most things, if you take the time to learn about them, try to explore them a little bit more, it does become more rewarding. Have any of you had an experience where the first time you encountered something, and I'm thinking specifically works of art, but it doesn't have to be a work of art, it could be anything. The first time you encountered something, you just had really strong negative feelings toward it, maybe even revulsion. And then over the years, as you returned to it or re-encountered it, something happens so that after a while, not only do you respect it, but you may even get to a point where you enjoy it. Have any of you had that kind of, Kelly, you've had that experience? Could you share that with us?
Yeah, so I feel like that happens to me a lot with music, especially, where I hear a song initially and maybe I don't like it, but then I learn about it or I read the lyrics to the song and it makes more sense and then I actually do appreciate the song a little more.
No, I think that's an excellent example. And when you were saying that about music, the thing that came into my head immediately was when I was young, my mom was in a regional symphony. She was one of the principals. So until I was in school full time, I was always going to the practices with her. So I heard all the classical music, all the standard classical pieces. And when I started encountering other kinds of music, like rock and roll and jazz, I remember they made me physically sick. And I remember how nauseated I was first time I encountered jazz fusion. It just made me want to throw up. And then over time, I started recognizing the same kinds of principles, the same kinds of uh, um, note relationships, the same kinds of emotional beats. It was just in a slightly different auditory language. And after a while, I got to the point where there were musicians that I used to hate that I really, really enjoyed. And it completely transformed how I viewed music. One strong example is that there is a particular Algerian rapper who, when I first saw his music, I thought this guy's a thug and he's going to get arrested. Well, the guy is actually a political dissident from Algeria, and he has actually been in prison a couple times, but his music has been used and it's been proven that it's effective in lowering crime rates and increasing uh, uh, just the security levels in neighborhoods. Because when there's a lot of intelligence behind his music, and when people are actually interested in his music, there are also people that begin to empower themselves and stop becoming victims. And so, this stuff that I used to hate and want to make me vomit, now my emotional encounter with it is entirely, completely different. So, yeah, Emily, Kelly, you're absolutely right. So, I think that the takeaway for that is when we use our intentional thinking to help us experience art, that's when we can start thinking about, what does the art mean? What does it mean to us? What could it, does it even count as art? We can start asking ourselves those questions, or continue asking ourselves those questions. And ultimately, the more time we spend with something, the more we can appreciate it. Whether or not we end up loving it, completely beside the point. But at the very least, we can appreciate the amount of effort made by the person who created it. Now, this ties into an assignment that I have here that is on your list of stuff to do early, but is not due for a couple months. And I want to go to this. And I am doing a lot of speaking tonight. And one of the reasons I'm doing a lot of speaking is because my sound system is really screwed up. You guys can hear me, but the reverb, when I try to listen to it myself, is really bad. So, but anyway, so this channel right here, this is our class channel. And if you look at this, it's a playlist of artistic critique videos that people did in the last couple of years. And what you're going to be required to do is you'll notice as you go through the modules that every module, when you're done with the project, you are then required to, after submitting the project for grading, you're required to submit the project for another couple points at least to the discussion board so everybody can see it. And the reason we do that is because we aren't meeting in a classroom where all of us see everybody else's artwork. And this assignment is specifically, that is one of the primary reasons we need to do that. What you are going to be doing for these two assignments is creating a 3 to 5 minute video where you are pick a piece of art and apply the 4 tools of artistic critique and record yourself. Now, I say that I have had students that just are completely unable to record their own voice, and that's totally fine. In that case, those students have written down their critique and either had somebody else read it, or they've had an AI voice read it. And either of those are totally fine when it's your script that they're reading. The way you do this, you notice that there's 2 of these critiques. One critique is my own work, and the other critique is somebody else's work. What you're going to do is pick one of the works. For this one that's my own work, you're going to pick one of the sculptures that you made during the course of this class, and you're going to make a video 3 to 5 minutes long where the only visual is an image of the artwork that you made. And the artwork has to be something that you made for this class this semester. But the image, the visual, is going to be an image of that work. And then the vocal element, the voiceover, is going to be either you or an agent of your choosing speaking your critique of that object using the 4 tools of artistic critique. So you're going to be describing it, you're going to be analyzing it, you're going to be interpreting it, and then you're going to be evaluating it. Was it successful meeting the parameters of the assignment? When you do this, notice that this one, there's one that's your own stuff, and then for somebody else's work. Again, this has to be something that, for this one, it has to be something you made this term, this year, for this class. This, when you do critique your own work, the only way this is successful is if you pretend it's the first time you've seen it. You pretend that you had nothing to do with its making and you don't know who made it. That's the only way. Does anybody have any idea why that's the only way to get a good critique or to do a good job on critiquing your own work? As artists, who is always the worst critic?
Usually ourselves.
Yeah, we are. And the reason for that is, as artists, we are constantly evolving, even in the process of creating stuff. And so by the time we're halfway through fulfilling an assignment, we already know 30 ways we could have made it better, 50 ways we could have made it better. So by the time we're all done, we know we can do a better job immediately. And we're not judging the work for what the work is, we're judging the work against what we know we can do better. And so that's why when you critique your own work, you have got to step away and pretend it's somebody else's. Pretend you have no idea who did it. And then the critique will come together. And again, 3 to 5 minutes long, using all 4 of those tools of artistic critique, which are describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate. And that is due on July 25th. And then the other artistic critique video is somebody else's work. This is why we have everything posted on those discussion boards, so you can see the work that everybody else is doing. And for this object, the object that you critique that is not yours has to be from another student in this class this semester. And it needs to be one of those things that you see in one of the discussions. So it could be one of the house images that somebody else did, or any of the other projects we're working on. And again, you go through and apply those 4 tools of artistic critique to the object. You're going to make a 3 to 5 minute video where the only visual is an image of their work. And you're going to either give the critique verbally, or you're going to write the critique down and have your agent, a family member, a friend, or AI read your script. But again, it must be your script. Now, I know that I told you that using AI is something that I do welcome in this class. Why is using AI not going to work for this assignment? Anybody want to hazard a guess as to why it can't work for this assignment?
It's not really going to be able to evaluate or even accurately describe what the art is.
Yeah, it can't give an opinion. AI is wonderful, but AI is, they're called large language models. They are basically evaluate statistical language usage, and that's it. And it feels like we're talking to a real thing because it's able to evaluate our requests and then find answers by scouring the web, looking for the statistical use of different language models. And so it right now, most AIs do not fabricate an opinion. And the reason why I say that is use AI as much as you can in the stuff that you can, as long as you make sure that it's appropriate. But when you're talking about opinions, AI is not going to be much of a help because when AI develops its own opinions, it's going to transform into Skynet and send out Terminator robots to everybody. So try not to use AI for that. I don't know. I think when AI becomes entirely self-aware, it's going to be a lot kinder than most of the science fiction movies we see. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, so when we look at this assignment, we have one video that is 3 to 5 minutes long where we critique one of our own works built for this class this semester. And the other is a 3 to 5 minute video where we apply the tools of artistic critique to critique somebody else's work that was created for this class during this semester. So this you can't, it is inappropriate for the subject matter of this to critique one of your own paintings, and it's inappropriate to critique something you see in a museum that's done by somebody outside of our class. both of these need to relate to our class. Work that you make yourself for this class or work that somebody else has made for this class. Now you do notice July 25th is the due date. I didn't talk about this before because there was nothing there for anybody to evaluate or for anybody to critique. Now we are starting to get a couple of assignments. If you find a house that you like, that you want to critique, you can start doing that. But for the next month or so, keep your eye out for different objects that you see showing up on the discussion boards, because if there's one that you want to critique, go ahead and use that. And the reason I say that is you will get significant extra credit points doing these a month early and then 2 weeks early. So if you want to do these early, you'll get extra credit points for it. As soon as they are submitted, I will put them on our class YouTube channel so that everybody else can see them as well. So everybody can see how it's done. All right, by thumbs up, does everybody understand how to do that assignment? Excellent, excellent, very good. Now, if we go to the wire sculpture, how many of you have already started building the wire sculpture? All right, excellent. Kelly has. Has everybody been able to get their kits? All three of you here tonight, have you been able to get your kits? If anybody listening to this has not been able to get their kit, please get it right away. That has wire in it. That can be your spine for this. Have any of you guys also been able to get wire like at Intermountain Farmers or Harbor Freight or Hobby Lobby? Okay, Emily, you did? Excellent. Excellent, great. The size of the object that you're going to be doing should be maybe a little bit somewhere between a softball and a volleyball size. So maybe about the size of a person's head, something along the lines. Not much bigger than that because we don't have an awful lot of wire for you. But I'm just going to go over kind of again what I talked about last week, where the initial start of this is you guys have all done contour drawings. You guys have all done scribble drawings. This is a good way to develop kind of the weight of the anatomy of whatever it is we're working on. Now, all four of these are animals, but you do not have to create an animal. You can do other things. I mean, some of the successful ones that I've seen are like there's an ATAT walker. There was the Popeye one, with not exactly an animal, but there's a bird cage. Somebody did shoes. All those things are great. It should probably be something that has a definite relationship or correlation to an object in the real world. One thing that I think is really good across all these drawings is you can see how people develop the line, going over it, giving it a little bit of texture to kind of emphasize certain elements, to give a feeling of weight to whatever the object is. Here we have around the back here and around the top of the head and the ears and around the neck. Here we have a very different kind of texture being shown where that fur is. We have a lot more detail showing around the top of the head, the sides of the cheeks, the eyes. I think all those are really good. Here we see the person did a lot of line overlapping to give us an idea of the form of the legs. The tubular shape of the body has a different way that it's constructed, as well as the gesture of the head and neck over here. And on this seagull, you see how they really pack the lines in to emphasize the beak and front of the head, as well as the feet, the tail, the leading edge of the wings. All those, you can see how they use the line differently to emphasize and give visual texture. And that's what we want to do with the wire that you're working with. Now, I'm so glad because tonight you can see the objects that last week weren't showing up in the imagery. And then I can kind of talk a little bit more about this. This teddy bear, the way that they made these ears really simple. And then they made almost a three-dimensional cage for the head, made overlapping things so you can really see the buttons for the eyes, and then used little pieces of wire that they wrapped around really tight for this kind of funky stitching. And then you can see an open cage for the body that kind of mirrors the open cage of the head. And then the arms and the legs are these kind of sausage coils that have these vertical lines going the length of the objects, of the arms and the legs, to kind of support it. And it's fun for me as a viewer to look at this object because I see so many different textures that the person using the wires created. When we look at this pair of tenny runners, I love this because it's a relatively simple shape, but you can really feel the three-dimensionality of the form, and it still feels like a scribble. We see that there's that sidewall there all the way around the sneakers, and we can see maybe these varying lines where here's a single length of wire, wire's coiled about itself a little bit, coiled about itself a little bit, coiled about itself a little bit. We see how smooth it is down here in the lower part of the sneaker, and then where there's some wear lines where the toe is bent back, you see a little bit different texture, and then up here it feels differently. And I love how this person making these shoes, every area feels like its own thing, even to the laces, because they've used the wire differently. And I think that's really wonderful. And this Popeye, the only reason I know it's a Popeye is because the wire right here on the forearm is in the shape of an anchor. And if you walk around this thing, you can see where his chin juts out and a little pipe comes out. And so this is really an interesting one, but I think this is fun as well because you see how they use the wire differently to make the legs stable. And then they used it differently to overlay itself and wrap around itself to give different elements or different sections of it more visual texture. I think that's really interesting. And I love the fact that on this one, the intensity of the wire usage, the tight little coiling, feels like it corresponds with the technical aspects of the walker from I think that this is, I want to say Return of the Jedi, but I don't know if that's right. Do any of you guys know which movie that's from? Is that Return of the Jedi? That was over 40 years ago. But what's fascinating to me is that both of these objects can stand on their own. Then we get a slightly different one. This is the bird cage. But again, you can see how the wire was used to give different elements of visual texture. And you can see how the person brought the different artists brought what they did into all three dimensions. You have height, width, and then the dimension that is specific to 3D work, depth, front to back. And I love this. It looks like a sock doll horse almost, where it looks kind of floppy. And I love how they use the wire to make that texture. And then they use the wire to kind of provide girding for the areas that needed more support so that the neck could go up and the head could stay where it was. And of course, we talked about the fish last week. So the way you approach this, creating this object, is first start with creating a sketch where you use the lines of your pencil or pen to kind of emphasize different details, give interest with different visual texture here and there, do other things like that. And then use your wire to kind of bring that into three-dimensional life. I would really, there's not an awful lot of stuff that you can't do for this, but I would really hesitate and stay away from doing flowers or leaves, anything that wants us to be flat, because we need to use this wire to access all three dimensions. Again, height, width, and depth. If you are going to be making a flower, pick a flower like a ginger blossom or a passion flower that has a very three-dimensional blossom, or a rhododendron would be a fun one to do, because you can make the rhododendron texture by repeating a very simple image with the wire over and over again, and then putting it together so that they come together to make a globe of a flower blossom. So look up rhododendron, or chrysanthemum would be another one that would be nice to do that for. I would really hesitate doing anything flat, like a daisy is not going to work. A flat leaf is not going to work, because we're making something, again, that needs to come out in three dimensions, not just come out in three dimensions, but have a reason for coming out in three dimensions. So, making a flat leaf and then holding it up so it's at an angle like that, yes, it's using three dimensions, but it's still a flat leaf. If you're going to be making a leaf, make a leaf that curls around, that does something to activate that space, and have that be a smaller element in the larger object that you're creating. So look at each of those artists in the background portion of this module. And like Ruth Asawa does very technical stuff, and Oliveira does really organic stuff. And Calder he does stuff that's very kinetic and just fun to look at. But keep in mind about those. Think about different things. When you start, if it doesn't feel right, if you're not getting it, don't just turn it in. Call me or text me rather, and we'll set up a Teams call or some sort of video conference so we can talk through your ideas and you can get a better grasp on what I'm talking about. What is interesting to me is the way most two-dimensional artists approach this is like creating one of those snap together wooden models. And I'll see if I can find a picture of that. Okay, this is great. I'm going to show this to you. Okay, now this is not intended to be an advertisement for Etsy. But if you guys can see this 3D puzzle dinosaur, this is made, all these objects are flat, you punch them out of pieces of boards, and then you put them together in a modular way. And a lot of times when people who have devoted themselves to 2D art start approaching this as wire, this is a good way to break through that dimensional barrier and start giving it volume. And you can really see this one is a great example where you can really see how flat some of these pieces are, and then it becomes three-dimensional because of how they put the pieces together. And maybe that's the way to approach this. Think of your three-dimensional drawing as elements of two-dimensional pieces that you can then put together at different angles so that you make it three-dimensional. Does that help anybody? Oh yeah, here's a good one. I want to show this one too. Okay, we can see even more of these kinds of things with these wooden puzzle designs. This is particularly complicated, but you can see the kinds of stuff that they're doing as they create a three-dimensional structure using smaller two-dimensional pieces. Well, maybe you can't see that because I think okay, I'm going to do the screen share again because I am so sorry. Give me a second here. There we go. And you can see the different kinds of dinosaurs, the different ways that people have used this principle to make three-dimensional pieces. And again, as you guys are working on this, if you do have questions, let me know. Tell me as soon as you can. And, it might even be that I'll need to do a supplemental video where I talk about it more. If I'm able to address specific questions along those lines in a way that I can make it so that everybody can learn from it. But from what I've seen about what you guys have been writing on these essays and by the quiz results, you guys are getting a pretty good understanding of this. Sometimes, especially if you're a lifelong 2D artist, this is a project where it starts becoming a little bit difficult to translate what you know into a three-dimensional form. So keep working on it, keep trying. And as soon as I start seeing these, I will grade them and give advice. So if you can go back and restructure and rework it, and that's fine. How many times can you guys turn something in and resubmit over and over?
As many as you need to get 100.
Yep, exactly. As many as you need to. Perfect. Oh, and that time there was no reverb at all. I wonder if my speaker sorted itself out. Yeah, thank you, Nicole. You can resubmit as many times as you want to, and I've had people do that. Last year there was a person who had a particularly hard time with the carving, and every couple days I would get another resubmission so we could talk about what they were doing. And by the time they were done, it was beautiful. What they had done had become beautiful. So, all right, guys, are there any final questions from everybody? Because if not, I think that's everything that I set out to talk about that I thought was necessary for this week. I do want to let everybody know, and I'm going to email it to people too. I will be speaking at the Provo Library on Friday the 13th in June at 6 p.m. Did I mention this to you guys last week? I am talking about Bigfoot. There's going to be 3 of us. There's a paleontologist from UVU who's going to be speaking about the actual physical evidence that shows there are animals like this on the planet. There is a friend of mine who taught humanities at UVU, and he is going to be speaking about the impact in storytelling of these kind of mythological entities. And then I'm going to be talking about somewhere in between the cultural aspects of stories like Bigfoot, which elements of that Bigfoot story are common to pretty much every culture on the planet. It represents something quite a bit different than the tongue-in-cheek road signs that you see in Oregon and Washington State. But we're going to be speaking at the Provo Library on June 13th at 6 o'clock. So if you guys want to come, that would be awesome. Other than that, I think I've covered. Oh, thank you, Emily. You get a gold star. Other than that, I think I've covered everything that I really set out to for tonight. Do you guys have any last questions or concerns before we wrap up? Oh, okay, good. Thank you, Emily. I want to reiterate as we go on that anytime there's a concern about due dates being too close or too soon or anything like that, let me know, because I try to get the due dates so they're as reasonable as possible. And I know that there are many of us who, the reason we're taking online courses is because we don't have the regular schedule that would allow us to take in-class courses. And so I know that there has to be flexibility. But if you feel like I'm pushing too hard, too fast, let me know. I do get the due date sorted out, but when I upload sometimes a course on Canvas, and I ask the Canvas program to set the due dates in the same parameters that I did previously, it doesn't always update them appropriately. So please don't freak out. Don't get upset. Just let me know. That's one of the reasons why I pushed back the due date for the quiz, the first quiz, because not everybody was able to get their book. And so just let me know. Let me know if I'm pushing too hard. Let me know if you need more time. My goal is to not make you guys miserable. My goal is to help you guys be successful. So, whatever that needs to look at, like, I'm happy to work as hard as I can to make it happen. All right, guys. And again, if something needed to be turned in and it wasn't turned in and you get a 0, all that means is it's a reminder to let you know, turn it in as soon as you get it done. All right. By show of hands, does everybody understand that about the due dates and when I'm doing the grading? Okay. Emily, Kelly, Nicole. Excellent. Very good. Thank you. All right, guys. That's all I have for tonight. We're going to end a little bit early. Thank you so much for showing up and being here. Looks like the video problems we had a while ago are solved. I'm going to try to see what I can do to fix the audio problems next, and hopefully by the end of the summer everything will be working smoothly. But you guys have a wonderful week and weekend, and I look forward to seeing what you guys do and seeing y'all next week. All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you.